Alrighty, I'll just jump right
Oh
in.
yeah, I forgot.
Thank you all for coming today. This is actually a talk that I gave as an hour talk last year, so I had to consolidate this. So hopefully you can still get enough out of it. But afterwards, I will be over at the Google booth, so you can ask me all the questions you want after the talk as well. Actually, let me go back real quick. I have been leading the Google Summer Code program for about, well, since 2015. So I guess it's my 10th year or so. And I've been at Google since 2011. So I kind of wrote this talk based on my experience and feedback from a lot of our mentors and contributors that have taken part in the program. So first of all, there are many different mentorship programs for open source folks out there. Google Summer Code has been around for 21 years, so it's a pretty big one. It's the one a lot of people have heard about. There's also another great one, Outreachy, which is very similar to Summer Code, but it's for internships for people that are subject to systemic bias and that are impacted by underrepresentation in the technical industry where they are living. And then there's also Linux Foundation mentorship programs. These are just three of the larger ones. There are many others. There are many others that are held by universities, sometimes by open source projects themselves. A lot of projects, if they can't get everybody into Summer of Code or one of these other programs, that they have these great, excited mentees, they will kind of figure out a way to hopefully get them a little bit of money and help them throughout the program kind of on the side and doing their own version. So that's actually becoming more and more popular. Briefly, we're going to talk through kind of these 5 topics today, and I'm just going to go straight into it. All right, so why is mentorship so important in open source communities? Essentially, new contributors are the reason that communities kind of continue to thrive. You've got to have those fresh ideas coming in. You need to have new perspectives. So the ecosystem only stays healthy with new people constantly coming in, because a lot of people, whether they retire, they move on to other things, people come and go in any kind of community, and open source communities aren't any different. So you've got to keep new people coming in. Now, a sustainable ecosystem is ultimately the goal, and new folks coming in is a key way to do that. The other part of it is the knowledge share. You might have people who've been part of your open source community for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, and if something happens to them, they decide to leave the community, all that knowledge is gone. So by having mentors, they're passing their knowledge along to everybody else. So mentorship is vital. So let's start with, how do you get people into your community? You need to create a low barrier to entry. That is one of the things that we hear the most often with folks thinking about Summer of Code or any of these other programs. They're like, I don't know if I'm good enough. Can I do this? So getting started in open source is overwhelming in general for people, for just the normal person coming in going, well, this looks interesting. I'd like to contribute, but is anybody going to care about my opinion? Are they going to listen to me? Am I going to ask stupid questions? They think things like that. That's very common. So you want to make it as easy as possible for folks to come to your community. And by doing mentorship programs or any kind of mentorship, program, we'll say that for now, then that really allows people to understand that you want them there, that you are creating this opportunity to bring in all these new folks. So one of the key things to a healthy onboarding experience for any new contributor is good, solid documentation. Not something that open source projects are historically known to do well. Fortunately, it's gotten much better over the last, I've been in open source since 2011, so 14 years. It's gotten so much better in the last 6, 7, 8 years than it was 14 years ago. A lot of that does have to do with programs like Google Summer Code, and we also did a program called Google Code-In. That was for high school students. So any organization that took part in Google Code-In very quickly learned they had to have good documentation. Otherwise, they're going to have 100 people asking the exact same question over and over and over again within a 2-week period, which is incredibly frustrating to everybody. So you want to have an easy place for people to be able to find those answers. So having quality documentation is really important. Having some basic things on there, like what is it that your project does? That's important. Sometimes I've gone to, when I review organization applications for GSOC, I look at the different, the program sites or the community sites, and sometimes it's not clear what it is that the organization is trying to accomplish. That's never good. So you need to make it very clear to anybody coming to your community what it is that you do. You also need to have and you want it to be clear. You don't have to have a fancy UI. It can be very basic, but just some simple things on there. What is it that your org does? Link to the code base so they can easily go find the code base and they can kind of dig through it and see what's going on. And having some very basic FAQs, super helpful. All of these things make it a much more welcoming environment for anybody coming into open source. You also need to make it just easy to find. When I'm looking through all of these these community sites and I'm reading through them, I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, sometimes they are really, really bad at just basically organizing the information. Again, not everybody is a UX person, that's great, but just have somebody who doesn't know anything about your community look at your page and say, hey, can you answer these 5 questions? And if they can't figure out where to get to your code base, where to find help, how to reach out to your community, whether that's through a chat channel, through an email, then something's wrong. You need to clean that up. You also really want to have some place where you have a link to kind of the first time or the first, like, what do you call it? Oh my gosh. Just the easy things that you want somebody to do when they come to your community. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, sorry. That's first issues, that's exactly, thank you, first issues. Sorry, a little jet lag. So you want to have a place where anybody coming into your community can sit there and go, oh, this is a simple thing I can do. Let me just take a little, poke at that. And they go, oh, okay, this is cool. I can do this one thing. You just want them to feel, again, welcomed and that they kind of get that feeling that you're organized and you kind of know what you're doing. Because if it's all discombobulated and jumbled, that's not great. That's not what a community that I would want to go into. Also think about open source in the sense that it's not just about developers. Yes, you need people writing the code, but you also need people who are technical writers, so they can write that documentation, and you need people who do marketing. How are you going to tell people about your open source project and your community and the things that you're doing? Because you need to tell people about what you're doing so you get more people to come into your community. It's kind of the cycle. You need people who are testers. A lot of people don't like to test your code. Well, you need to have good code for your open source project to continue to thrive. You don't want it to be all, icky is the word I'm going to use. So you also need folks who are designers. And again, it doesn't have to be a super fancy, basic website for your page, but if you're just having your page is just everybody going to a GitHub, to GitHub, that's not great. Like, you need to have a very basic design. And there's so many open source projects out there that can help you with that. So please think at least a little bit about the design and making it easy for people to find your project and to understand what's going on. Program and project managers. So I'm a program manager. You do need people who can kind of bring everybody together. Maybe you're going to do a release in a few months. You need somebody to kind of look at the bigger picture and say, okay, what are all the moving parts? How do we coordinate this? You need 1 or 2 people to really coordinate that, because developers focus on the code, and that's great, but oftentimes they're not thinking about the whole big picture. They're thinking about the one thing that they care about. And so you often have, one thing has to happen before this next thing happens. So you need a program manager to design that. You also need event planners if you're going to have any kind of a community meeting for your org. Maybe you're trying to get folks to go to an event like FOSSASIA and you're trying to coordinate everybody. Maybe it's just basically trying to get people into a hotel together or going to dinner. Sometimes it's amazing how complicated that can be, especially with many different people and just trying to make a reservation. So you need people who think like an event planner. And there are also other different skill sets are often needed depending on the size of your community. So thinking about it, if you're a new contributor, where do they get started? Is it with a pull request? Are they going to maybe file or fix one of the bugs or one of your first issues? Is it fixing documentation? This is actually one I really like a lot, and that we did that was very helpful for folks in the Google coding contest, because somebody would go in and they couldn't find the answer to their question, and so the part of the process of the program was people would say, oh, well, go and add that into the documentation so the next person who has that problem will be able to find the information. So if you can't figure it out, neither can anybody else. So fix the documentation. That's a nice, easy way for folks to get started, because it's not a heavy lift. It doesn't feel too scary, because you really want to help them alleviate that imposter syndrome. I get this all the time. People, no matter where I am in the world, talking at a conference or talking to folks at our mentor summit or contributors anywhere or even online through emails, most people don't think they're good enough, especially if you're talking about folks who are maybe in university or very early in their open source careers. They don't think, that their opinion would matter. Like, hey, these people have been doing this for 30 years. Why do they care what I think? So you really want to make it as easy as possible for them to feel welcomed, to feel like your community cares and they want you there, or they want them there. Because that's why mentorship programs are so important, because the whole point is that you're going to have people that are mentoring these folks. You want to help them. You want to help them succeed. You want them to become, hopefully, long-term committers to your projects. And again, back to new contributors mean a healthy and sustainable open source community. So you've got to get those new folks in there. So make it as easy as possible for them to succeed and to feel welcomed. All right, there's a whole bunch of things on this list. And this list actually I put together by asking the question of our mentors and our feedback from Google Summer Code every year and from our students. And we asked the question, how can you be a great mentor? The things that come up most often from the contributors about why they thought their mentor was so amazing were the things on this list. I won't go through all of them, but I'll pull out a few of them here. So number one, adjust to your mentee. Everybody's different. So sometimes you have somebody who wants to be part of your community, but they're incredibly shy. So you need to figure out how to communicate with them so that they feel like they can ask you questions and that they don't feel like it's a burden every time they ask you a question. And on the other end, you have people who want to ask you 1,800 questions, and it's a little much. And so you've got to kind of put a boundary on that as well, because as a mentor, your time is valuable as well. Often, many of you have day jobs, you have families, you have lives, and you do open source in your spare time because you care about the open source community that you're a part of. So just figure out that way to adjust to the person. And each person is different. If you try to keep a very set standard for every single mentee, it's not going to work. So be flexible. The thing that comes up the most often that folks say was so important to them when they were doing Google Summer Code or any kind of program like that is they felt empowered by their mentors, because the mentors are teaching them along the way, but they're also letting them realize, like, hey, you can do this. You can figure out how to answer these questions. You can figure out how to do these things on your own. I'm going to help you find those resources so that you know how to do it in the future, but you can do these, all these different things. Teacher. That is, when you think of a mentor, that's probably one of the first things that you think of, because you are teaching new skills. You're teaching them soft skills, like just being able to communicate, because often you may be here in Thailand, and then the person could be in Poland or Argentina that you're mentoring. So you just need to really set those expectations that, you're there to teach them and that you want them to succeed, but you've also got to figure out kind of where they're coming from, because everybody each culture is a little bit different, so you've got to adjust in that sense as well. You also really want to focus on those problem-solving skills. You want to help them figure out how to find the answers. Not everything can be answered with just a Google search. I know, hard to believe. But you do need to show them there's so many different resources to find answers to their questions to help them succeed. We'll skip through some of the rest of these. Just really being available so that they know that they can ask you a question, and you can set boundaries. So think about it as, maybe you're talking to your mentee, you're having conversations, whether that's via chat or a virtual chat, a couple times a week. But you can set boundaries and say, hey, I'm not available for Monday nights and Thursday nights. I've got time with my family, so don't expect a response from me during that time, but I'll get back to you the next day. That's fine. Just set those expectations. And I think the earlier you set expectations with folks, the more successful your situation will be. All right. So how to keep contributors involved after their mentorship program ends. This is really important. This is one of the things that comes up very often. So we've really tried to talk to our organization administrators and mentors in Google Summer Code and kind of pull these 6 things out as the top ways to keep folks involved. Encourage ownership of their project. Let them understand that, hey, you've done this really cool thing. You've built this project during the program. But if you leave, that project may not be picked up by anybody else, and it just may die. So you want to encourage them, you don't want to threaten them, but you want to encourage them that, hey, you can keep working on this project. But you can also basically show them ways to do other things. Like maybe they did this project, they did a great job with it, but during the course of the project, you realized that their interest was really piqued with some of these other things that your community was doing, or maybe one particular part of the project. You're like, hey, we have this other project that we'd really like to get someone working on. Why don't you look at this? This could be something that you could go on and continue on in the community. That's really important because that shows the person, the mentee, one, that you want them there, that the community wants them to stay, but also that they can find different ways to stay interested and excited. And there's so many opportunities in your community for them to keep learning. Saying thank you. And this goes both ways. You should, hopefully the mentor or mentee is saying thank you to the mentor as well, but you just want to say thank you, your work is appreciated. That goes a really long way for people. Oftentimes, a lot of the organizations do some sort of a social blast, kind of celebrating the work. Some organizations will do a group kind of meeting at the end saying, hey, these are our 5 Summer of Code projects that finished this year, and then each person will give a 5-minute or 10-minute talk about what they accomplished. That really means a lot. Like, it can be a little scary for some folks, so you can kind of help, the mentor can kind of help them get prepared, and sometimes the mentor might want to kind of present with the mentee if they're very, very shy, and that's okay, but you want to celebrate their work. Sometimes it's doing a blog post. That's fine too. Or you can do different links to their projects that they worked on. Just some way to show your community what this person's done, and so that everybody can celebrate them and they can feel appreciated. You want to, some people do help the mentor or mentee write CFPs, so call for papers for conferences. And a lot of folks will go on and present at conferences about the projects they worked on in your community. That's a great way to also keep them involved. You can even have them present to your community, like I mentioned, and then ultimately just stay in contact. You don't have to email them every week. But if they disappear for a few weeks from your community, you might just send them a quick little chat or just a text or however it is that you're communicating with one another, just to check in, like, hey, we haven't heard from you, just making sure you're okay. You don't want to bother them every week, but if there's been an extended period of time and you're used to chatting with them about once a week and it's been 3 or 4 weeks, just check in, make sure they're okay. So just kind of keeping that contact can actually go pretty far. We have a whole section in our Google Summer of Code mentor guide on creating a lifetime contributor. Our mentor guide was actually written by former mentors, org admins, program admins like myself, and the GSOC students. So It's a pretty awesome guide. Even if you aren't involved in GSOC, that's fine. 97% of the information in there is relevant to any open source community. There's probably about 3% that's specific on, hey, this is how we do evaluations in GSOC. So you can ignore that. But 97% of the information is helpful to any open source community. And if you're doing any kind of mentorship program, I would suggest checking it out. And it's also not a, when I say guide, it's not like it's an 80-page book. Each chapter is about 1 to 2 pages. There's tons of great information. Now, these are actually the important links for the program. So number one at the very top is our Google Summer of Code site. That all these other links you can actually get to from that page. At the bottom, we have a whole section that help link. But these are helpful. And we have a contributor guide. So that's really helpful for folks coming into open source in general. Again, like the mentor guide, probably 95, 96% of it is relevant, even if you aren't involved in Summer of Code or outreach or programs like that. But just getting started into open source. Like there's sections like, am I good enough? And, the whole lifetime contributor section. There's lots of sections that are helpful for mentors or mentees. All right, got a few minutes for questions.
Yes, anyone has any questions?
All right.
Yeah, exactly. Very nice talk. One topic you only really touched slightly is mental burnout. So I'm a bit torn between your initial suggestion to make the entrance hurdle very easy so that people can enter, because that leads to a lot of mentees trying, and that leads again to a huge amount of work for the mentors. So for me, it is something that is really hard to balance, because we want a community. We don't want to lose the mentors, and that is very dangerous, because if we only have mentees without mentors, then we're done. So I'm really torn in how easy we should do this entrance hurdle, and I wanted to hear your opinion on that.
It's a great point. I think mentor burnout is certainly a thing. That is, I get that, especially for any of the mentors that took part in Google Code-In. You definitely understand that. It's a lot of work. One of the things I think is helpful is if you have folks who are new to your community, kind of make them into mentors as well. Like not brand new, but like maybe they've joined your community 6 months ago. So they kind of went through that onboarding process. So try to make that part of your kind of cycle so that, hey, y'all can go in and help these other people, because they're the ones that just had all those questions 6 months ago. So that's still all really, it should be, hopefully, fresh in their mind. So I think being able to kind of help use those people will help for the mentors who are doing this for 15, 20 years, who might be the ones that are answering the more complicated questions. Because there's a lot of the baseline questions that I think probably anybody in your community that's been there for 6 weeks, 2 months probably could answer. And it doesn't have to be someone who's been doing this for 30 years or 20 years. So that would be kind of my guess, or my suggestion. Oh, yes. Yes, who mentors the mentors? Great question. For Summer of Code, in theory, that's kind of the org admins. Like they're kind of watching, making sure the mentors are staying in line, I guess. I'm not sure they're really mentoring them, other than if they're doing something a little off, or maybe they're missing deadlines, or maybe they're not communicating enough, because the contributors will reach out to the org admins and say, hey, I haven't heard from my mentor in 3 weeks. That's a problem. It's really hard when you do big programs like Summer of Code. You have over 2,000 mentors each year. So some mentors are, let me put this, most mentors are amazing. Some are okay, and then there's a few that are like, they got into it maybe for the wrong reasons. They wanted a mentor certificate, whatever it is. That is a thing, apparently. So you actually really want to make sure that you're picking the right mentors to begin with, and they're doing it for the right reasons. Because I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, they told me I had to be a mentor. We actually had that happen before. Like, well, I was told I had to be a mentor. I'm like, no. No one should ever tell you you have to be a mentor. That's going to be a bad situation for everybody, because you're not going to, as a mentor, you're not going to really want to mentee that person because you've been told you have to do it. So it needs to be a choice, because it's so much work. It is a lot of work to be a good mentor.
Thank you for the inspiring talk. I'm wondering if I could steal 50% of the slides because I'm amazed. But my question is, I did also a couple of doing some of course mentoring or outreach mentoring, and I think the mentees were quite successful when they did the work. But afterwards, well, they continue with the study, they move on, they get a new job, and the result is that we more or less lost most of the students. How can we make sure that they stay?
Nope. Did I go too far? Yes. So these tips I think are super helpful. I think really the number one thing is, well, encourage an ownership and really giving them ways that they can. Oh, sorry, my bad. Sorry, I talk loud. Sorry. Encourage. Did I just do that? Oh, okay. Encourage ways for them to continue in your community. I think that's really the number one thing, and it doesn't have to be on that project. Like maybe you realize the person's more of a UX type person, or maybe they would be great at doing outreach in your community. They don't have to be a developer. I think you want to show them their different options, and I think that's the way to kind of create that hook. And you've got to do it early in the process. It can't be done in the last 2 weeks of whatever program. That would be my advice. I think that's it. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Stephanie, for
Yeah.
sharing your
Thank you.